Florida Governor Ron DeSantis joined Senator Marco Rubio on the campaign trail at a rally Thursday. DeSantis, who is seeking his second term in the governor's mansion, sounded his usual stump speech, blasting the Biden administration, blaming Democrats for inflation, and promising to keep his state free of government mandates and intrusions. DeSantis has consistently led his Democratic challenger Charlie Crist and is considered highly likely to win re-election. Rubio has also led his own opponent, Congresswoman Val Demings, but by slimmer margins.
We're the freest state in these United States. On education, though, first of all, if you look at our higher education in Florida, we're ranked number one for higher education, public higher education in America now for 5 straight years by U.S. News and World Report. And one of the reasons that is because those rankings look at value. And since I've been governor, we have not allowed any tuition increases at our state universities. And so you can go to University of Florida, UCF, these places. It's like $6,200, a little bit up or down depending on what university. And you're not going to be able to find a lot of that in other parts of the country. Interestingly enough, we now have it so that grandparents can qualify for in-state tuition for their grandkids. And so if you guys have grandkids in other parts of the country, and they want to get in-state tuition in Florida, they can use your residency in Florida to be able to do that. We aim to please. But one of our mantras has been that, the purpose of schooling, whether it's young, whether it's higher ed, the purpose of schooling is we want solid classical education. We do not want ideological indoctrination. And that's what we're working for. And part of what that is, so for the universities, what we just did this year is I signed legislation now. All tenured professors have to undergo review, periodic 5-year review, and can be let go if they're not producing. Because some of them get tenure, they don't do anything. Your job is to teach and to do things that matter to the university, not to politic and do other stuff. So we're happy to be able to do that, and we're going to do a lot more in that realm because it's very, very important. And a lot of parents are like, man, you raise your kids right, and then you send them to university, and they get concerned about what is being done. And the role of the university is to help people learn how to think and understand things. It's not to try to impose one specific worldview on the student body. And so that's what we're going to be working for in Florida. But it's also true in the K through 12. And we've seen examples of where people are trying to do that. Certainly around the country, it's happening very aggressively. When I was a kid, I was going up to school in Florida. I don't remember these agendas in school. We just had school. It just was what it was. Now, people are trying to put agendas in. And so in Florida, we said, that's not going to fly here. So we stood up. We fought back, and because we did, we have banned critical race theory in our K through 12 schools. We are not going to teach our kids in Florida to hate our country or to hate each other. We are going to teach real history. We're going to teach about the founding of our country. We're going to teach about our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. We're going to teach about what it means to be an American citizen. We're going to teach about the sacrifices that people have made to fight for our freedoms over the years. And we are going to do that with honor and integrity. And we also did, not only are we doing that, we signed legislation this year. From now on, November 7th, every year in Florida, is a day for people throughout Florida to reflect on, but for school kids to learn about in school about the victims of communist regimes throughout history. We're going to teach the truth about Marxism, Leninism. And so my wife and I think many of you know our First Lady. She's really fantastic. She's many people have been praying for her over the year and a half, and we really appreciate it. She's doing very, very well, and I think you saw she did a commercial recently for us. And we talked about it, we wanted her to do it. So she had a concept in mind, and she's like, I want you to review this because I want to make sure you're good with it. And I'm like, I'm not reviewing it. She's like, why not? I said, because I trust you, and I want you to just say what's on your mind and speak from your heart. Don't let anyone tell you what you should say. I trust what you're going to do. So she went in, and when they do these these commercial shoots, there's cameras, there's staff, there's all these people milling about. So she kicked everybody out of the room except for one cameraman. She got rid of the script, and she just spoke to the camera straight from the heart. And that's why it was such a good ad, because people see how genuine she was. She's done an awful lot for this state. Most recently, she took the lead in helping victims from Hurricane Ian by setting up a Florida disaster fund, which people can go to at floridadisasterfund.org and donate. But she did that, solicited contributions. She's raised over $52 million for storm victims. So we have a 5, a 4, and a 2-year-old at home, and they put us through our paces, and there's a lot that goes on, especially with how busy we can be sometimes. And we did get to she brought on Saturday, Casey did she did the coin flip for the Florida State-Georgia Tech game at Doak Campbell Stadium. She brought all 3 kids with her to do that. Then I did the coin toss at the Florida-Georgia game in Jacksonville. Not great for Florida that happened, but nevertheless. And so she brought our 5 and 4-year-old, and they were able to go on the field in that. So they're involved, and we like it. But we think about, as parents, it's difficult to raise kids nowadays because there's so many different influences that come in. I mean, my kids, 5 and 4, they can find the Apple remote, and they start downloading stuff the minute we turn away. And so you think about it. And so our view is, we really want to be there for parents, and we think that parents, have the right to be able to send their kid to school, to be able to watch cartoons, just be kids, without always having somebody's agenda shoved down their kids' throats. Parents have the fundamental role in the education and upbringing of their kids. Our school systems, our charter schools, private, they're all very important, but they do not supersede the rights of parents. And so it's very important that we are standing with parents as they're raising families, because it's very difficult to do. So one of the things we had to do, we signed a bill called Parents' Rights in Education in the most recent legislative session. What does that say? Honestly, the fact that we even had to do it is kind of a sad commentary, but this is going on in other parts of the country. But we said that parents should be able to send their kid to elementary school without having things like sexuality and gender ideology injected into the curriculum. It is wrong for some school to be probing your child about these matters. It is wrong for a school to tell a 6-year-old that they may have been born in the wrong body or that their gender is a choice. That is wrong. That is happening in other parts of this country with things that are going on. So our view was, we need to provide those protections for parents. We need to make sure that we reoriented the proper role of the school vis-a-vis the parents, and we did that. And parents loved it. Honestly, most voters really loved it. The media got upset about it. The left got upset about it. And what they did because they knew, honestly, it was smart what they did, because they know that if they just try to oppose parents' rights straight on in an election, they're going to lose. I mean, just imagine if they knocked on your door and said, elect me because they want to do, gender ideology for first graders. That's not a very appealing message. Most parents don't want that. I think about my parents that are older. They don't even understand what any of this is. And so it's not a good message to actually win votes. So they understood that. So they said, we're not going to be able to win elections on it. But if we can enlist woke corporations to come out against it, apply corporate pressure, well, then you may have somebody like me, potentially would back down from support. And so they got the granddaddy of them all, Disney, to come out against the bill. And they were demagoguing it, all this stuff, which is fine. But, their bet was, because Disney really since the 60s has gotten everything they want in the state of Florida. They just call the shots, and everyone has basically bent the knee. Well, you got a new sheriff in town with me as governor. We're not working like that. We run the state of Florida. We don't subcontract out leadership. to corporations based in California. So, of course, we signed the legislation into law. We protected parents, and we made sure to do the right thing. Now, they wanted to continue to fight against it, said that they would get it repealed, sue over it, all that stuff. And, you know, you have the right to take those positions. That is fine. But you do not have the right for us to put you on a pedestal while you are doing that and while you are trying to undermine policy in this state. And so we work with the legislature because Disney has gotten so much subsidies and preferential treatment for like decades. They have their own government in Central Florida. They are exempt from laws that their competitors have to follow, and they get major tax breaks. So we said, those are your values. Those are not Florida's values. You are not going to be on a pedestal. Work with the legislature. And because we did, Disney's no longer going to have its own government. They're going to live under the same laws as everybody else, and they're going to pay their fair share of taxes in the state of Florida. But it raises the issue of what I call the woke mind virus, because it's this way of thinking that has infected so many institutions. It's infected corporate America, as we see all the time with them. You know, they get mad if, like, I show up at a concert, right? But yet you could have these other leftist politicians show up. You know, the difference is I get cheered at the concerts. The leftists would get booed at the concerts. But forget that. So they get mad about stuff like that. And even think about like what we've had to do in Florida. And I was proud to do it, but we signed legislation 2 years ago protecting women athletes from having them have fair competition. How do you compete for 3 years on the men's swim team and then switch to the women's and you win the championship? I'm sorry, that is a total fraud, and everybody knows it. And so it's taking away opportunities for young girls, women athletes. They're working hard. They want to win championships. And then you're basically saying you got to compete against biological males. So that's wrong. And in the state of Florida, we are protecting the integrity of women's sports. And we're going to make sure they have opportunities. We also, unfortunately, woke has overtaken parts of our medical community. And so you see things, and we're now taking action on this, but what they are doing, and they say it's gender-affirming care, but they're actually performing sex change operations on minors. So you will have, and look, teenagers are going through a lot. That's normal that you go through a lot. And dysphoria happens, but the thing that you know, if you do the research, over 80% of it in teens resolves itself by the time they are adults. So why are you disfiguring them, cutting off breasts, doing things on the bottom? It is wrong, and it's not based on science. What it is it's ideology taking over medical practice. And so European countries started to fiddle with this, and they realized it was wrong. So countries like Sweden have gone back in. But in our country, they're really trying to promote this. And so we said we can't have that in Florida. So we activated our Board of Medicine to do that, to promulgate a rule that would not allow this. And you know what we had? We have adults who went through these surgeries when they were kids testify in favor of what we're doing because they said the surgeries were wrong and they regret it. And it's hurt them having to go through this. So the fact that we even have to do that, so we now have a rule put in place in Florida. If you are mutilating kids, you're going to lose your medical license in our state. I'm sorry. Got to do it. So you see that, and you're like, man, I mean, how is it coming to that? The other thing you see with woke ideology, this is harming people. I mean, let's just be honest. It's harming people. Another place you see woke ideology is in the crime wave that you see throughout the country. This whole idea of defund police was born out of the BLM riots of 2020. They were attacking law enforcement. They were going around saying that their budget should be slashed and that you should give the money to social workers. Well, let me tell you this. If somebody's robbing you at gunpoint, is a social worker going to help you out at that point? No. You need law enforcement. So they went after the police. They attacked police. And morale is really low around the country now because of what they've done. Incidentally, morale's very high in Florida because we treat them well. And we actually saw that what was going on. So I just instituted a program here. Not only do we treat well, if you come from one of these other jurisdictions where they're not treating you well, like NYPD or these you get a $5,000 signing bonus in the state of Florida. So they are lining up to come down here, and we're happy with that. But that whole thing was based off an ideology that is blaming law enforcement rather than blaming criminals for criminal activity. And so you've seen crime spike. Another way woke is making people less safe. These prosecutors that are getting elected in these jurisdictions, usually funded with campaign support from people like George Soros, putting these people into office. And what they do is they say, we want to reform the justice system. We want to do all this. But they're not going through the legislature to change laws. Those would not be good legal changes, by the way. I don't believe in letting people out of prison, or I believe in holding criminals accountable. But that's what they want. They want to blame society rather than blame the perpetrator. So they can't get these changes through the legislature. The prosecutors get elected, and they say, we're just not going to enforce laws we don't like. So you go to San Francisco, they can rob stores blind and not even get prosecuted. People assume their car is going to get broken into and that the law enforcement's not going to do anything about it. And you absolutely have had way more murders and other types of very serious criminal offenses because of this soft on crime posture. So woke ideology is destructive. It is motivating disastrous policies in our country and other parts of the state and other parts of the United States. And I have acted on this issue such that in the state of Florida, we are the place where woke goes to die. So we have an opportunity on November 8th to do a lot of good. If you all come out and vote and get a lot of people to come out to vote, you can re-elect your governor again. Should be fun. We were very close to having a much different future 4 years ago in a very close election. And it was a 0.5 percentage point. And if it had gone the other way, this whole state would have descended into a Faucian dystopia during COVID. You would have had BLM riots all across, roaming wild. You would have all this bad stuff in the schools. I mean, it would be a radically different place. And so don't take freedom for granted. Don't take the direction of the state for granted. It's there. Our continued success is there for the taking, but it is a choice you got to make, and you got to go out there and do it. But we came very, very close. How many of you have moved to Florida since I got elected governor over the last 4 years? Okay, so we got a lot. How many of you would have still moved if the other guy had been elected governor? Would you still have come here? Not a lot. I don't see any. Yeah, honestly, it's sad, but that's just the reality. So we know how important that race is. We also have opportunities to win. You had Marco here for the U.S. Senate. We're going to win a majority in the U.S. Senate. We have a chance to win super majorities in the Florida legislature, both chambers, that can help me continue to put big wins on the board in Tallahassee. And that's important. We could also add at least 4 members of Congress as Republicans from Florida above what we already have. We have 16. We could end up with 20. I don't know, maybe even more. And if we do that, you know what that means? That means we retire Nancy Pelosi once and for all. Yeah. And we're happy to do that. We're happy to work hard, and, we're helping to get out the vote, and we will do that. But, the fact that we have to do that, to win the big election after decades and decades of her being up there, what it shows you, though, we need term limits for members of Congress. Very important to have that. We've also been able to elect a lot of great members to school boards throughout the state of Florida. These are members that are going to respect parents' rights, that are going to want to have classical education, and that are not going to allow some of these ideologies to get into the classroom. And so we have some more of those seats up, although we want a lot of them in August, which is very, very good. So we have a great opportunity here if we just work hard over the next however many days. I lose track, to be honest, because we've had a lot going. You know, we had the campaign starting it kind of started in September, like in earnest. We've been preparing for a long time. So we have all these things planned, everything. And then, we got a visit from a very mean fella named Ian. And he came down to Southwest Florida, and that really was an all-hands-on-deck moment for the state. We were able to have 42,000 utility workers pre-staged in the state of Florida to be able to help with restoration. Did millions of restorations, our utilities did, in record time. We also had search and rescue deployed, even as tropical storm force winds were still circulating in Southwest Florida. We had people helicoptering, boating, driving into Southwest Florida to be able to effectuate rescues. And they did thousands of rescues, particularly on those barrier islands. And when you had situations where there was really massive structural damage, like it knocked out a bridge and going to Pine Island in Southwest Florida, knocked out the Sanibel Causeway in 3 different places. And those are not state roads or state bridges. And the locals were telling the residents, it's going to be 6 months and you got to get off these islands because we're just not going to have enough stuff for you there. So they came to me and they said, can you help us? And, I looked, I was like, it's not a state road, but yeah, I'll help you. Well, what do you need? They're like, we need to get back and forth from the island. So we thought, can you do boats? Can you do that? And you could, but it just wouldn't work. I was like, we got to fix this thing. So we went and said, we'll take it over. We'll do it. We got a contractor in place. Said, how long is it going to take? They're like, well, we think we can do it, in a few weeks. And I was like, can we do it quicker than that? They're like, all right. We get it. We'll promise we can do it in a week. I'm like, well, that's better because, we did it. The storm came a couple days later. We announced in a week that, we went forward with it. We took the mantle and didn't sit around. And we were able to restore the bridge in 3 days, which some people thought would take 6 months. So... And then we did the Sanibel Causeway, 3 breaks in that, and less than 2 weeks after it opened, or after it was broken, we were able to do a massive convoy of electrical trucks, debris removal, like 500 trucks, kind of a one-time deal. Then we had to patch it up. But 3 weeks to the day of the destruction of that bridge, we were able to reopen the Sanibel Causeway for everybody. And people thought that was going to take forever. So it just shows you that leadership does matter, and you want somebody that's not just going to sit on their hands, but it's going to be very proactive, somebody that's going to run into these fires and do everything he can to do things better for Floridians. And I think if you looked at me for the last 4 years, I don't shy away from issues. I dive headfirst into issues. We've led the country on so many different issues in the state of Florida. And it's just about the leadership. It's what it's all about. Thank you. Thank you. We are getting things done. That's right. We've delivered. And we'll continue to do. We got a lot more on our agenda. Big tax relief, more infrastructure. We're going to do more on education. And I actually have other proposals that because of the hurricane I wasn't able to formally unveil. We will do that probably before the legislative session next winter. But I'm reminded in thinking about kind of the state of Florida and how fortunate we are to live in Florida, how fortunate we are that our state is viewed as the citadel of freedom not just for our nation. There's people around the world who are looking to Florida for inspiration because of what we've been able to accomplish here. And it just shows you that you see what's going on with our country, with Washington bungling every single thing that they touch. I think Joe Biden is like King Midas in reverse. King Midas would touch, it turns to gold. Biden, he touches it, it turns into something much worse than that. And so it's frustrating. And a lot of people, the vast majority of Americans, they think that the country has seen its best days. They think that we're clearly on the wrong track. But, I think Florida provides the blueprint that other states can follow. We're going to continue to do well here, but I think all of these things can be solved. And I'm reminded of a scene at the end of the Constitutional Convention back in 1787. You had 55 delegates. They were working in Philadelphia to create a constitution. It almost failed multiple times because there was a lot of thorny issues, and you're taking 13 colonies and trying to make them one country. A lot of them, wanted to be very independent, and so there was a give and take on all this stuff. And so at the end of the convention, they're signing their names to the Constitution, and Benjamin Franklin stands up, and he looks to the front of the convention hall, and there was the chair that George Washington was the president of the Federal Convention. There was a chair that had a sun kind of peeking up from the back of the chair, and it was like you could see half the sun. And so Franklin said, Mr. President, I've been looking at that sun throughout the course of these proceedings, and I've been trying to figure out and racking my brain about whether that sun is a rising sun or whether that sun is a setting sun. And he's like, well, I know with what we've been able to accomplish today, we are providing a foundation for future generations to live as free people. I know that that is a rising sun. The state of Florida is our nation's rising sun. We've got work to do to make sure we continue to lead the way. So will you help me keep Florida free on November 8th? Thank you, guys. God bless you all.